What did Neanderthals eat for dinner? The simple answer is meat. Lots of it. For a long time, that was the whole story. We pictured them as big, brutish hunters dragging a mammoth leg back to a smoky cave. And that picture isn't entirely wrong. It's just incomplete. It's like describing a whole city by only talking about its tallest building. The real story of the Neanderthal diet is so much richer, so much more complex. And it tells us a lot about who they really were. They were not just cavemen. They were survivors. They were smart, adaptable, and a lot more like us than we used to think. Their dinner plate is one of the best ways to understand them. So how do we know any of this? It's not like they left behind recipe books. We know what they ate because they left behind clues. It's a kind of forensic science, but the crime scene is tens of thousands of years old. And scientists have gotten incredibly good at reading these clues. They look at bones, tools, and even the chemistry of Neanderthal skeletons themselves. Each piece of evidence adds another layer to the story. Let's start with the most obvious evidence. The bones. Not Neanderthal bones, but animal bones. At Neanderthal campsites and caves all over Europe and Asia, we find huge piles of them. These aren't just random bones scattered by nature. They are the leftovers from countless meals. We find the remains of woolly mammoths, woolly rhinos, giant bison, wild horses, reindeer, and red deer. These were not small animals. They were big, dangerous, and packed with calories. A single mammoth could feed a whole group for weeks, but just finding animal bones isn't enough. Maybe the Neanderthals just found a dead mammoth and scavenged the meat. That's what people used to think. But when we look closer at these bones, we see a clear story of active, skilled hunting. We see cut marks. These are tiny scratches left on the bone by stone tools. They are in specific places, right where you would slice to remove a muscle or cut through a tendon. They are the marks of a butcher. We also see impact fractures. A Neanderthal would use a heavy stone to smash open a long bone like a femur. Why? To get to the marrow inside. Bone marrow is incredibly rich in fat and nutrients. It's like a prehistoric power bar. Hyenas also crack bones for marrow, but the marks they leave are different. The marks on the bones at Neanderthal sites were made by Neanderthal tools for Neanderthal mouths. This tells us they were not just scavengers waiting for a lion to finish its meal. They were the ones making the kill. They were the top predators in their world. This wasn't an easy life. The injuries we see on Neanderthal skeletons tell a story of a dangerous job. Many adult Neanderthals have healed fractures on their arms, ribs, and heads. The pattern of these injuries is surprisingly similar to one modern group of people, rodeo riders. It's the kind of injury you get from being thrown around by a large, angry animal. Neanderthals didn't have long-range projectile weapons like bows and arrows. Their main hunting weapon was a heavy stone-tipped spear. They had to get up close. Imagine trying to take down a bison with a spear you have to thrust, not throw. It was a tough, brutal way to get dinner. The tools themselves are another huge clue. Neanderthals had a specific set of tools called the Mousterian toolkit. They were masters of a technique called levallois, a clever way to strike a prepared stone core to get a perfectly shaped flake every single time. It was like a prehistoric assembly line for making sharp tools. They made spear points for hunting. They made sharp flakes that acted as knives for butchering. They made scrapers for cleaning animal hides. Their entire toolkit screams meat processing. The tools and the bones found together paint a clear picture. They hunted big animals, they dragged the best parts back to their camp, and they used their specialized tools to slice up the meat, scrape the hides, and get every last bit of nutrition. But bones and tools only tell part of the story. For a long time, this was all we had. And it led to the idea that Neanderthals were hypercarnivores, eating almost nothing but meat, like polar bears or wolves. Then a new kind of science came along that let us look even deeper. It's called stable isotope analysis. It sounds complicated, but the idea is simple. You are what you eat. Literally. The chemical elements from the food you eat become part of your body, including your bones. One of these elements is nitrogen. There are two main types or isotopes of nitrogen, a lighter one nitrogen-14 and a heavier one nitrogen-15. When you go up the food chain, the amount of the heavy nitrogen-15 builds up in your body. Plants have the lowest level. Herbivores that eat the plants have a higher level. Carnivores that eat the herbivores have an even higher level, and a top predator that eats other carnivores would have the highest level of all. Scientists can take a tiny piece of a Neanderthal bone, even one that's 50,000 years old, and measure its nitrogen isotope ratio. What they found was shocking. Neanderthal nitrogen levels were incredibly high. They weren't just at the level of a carnivore like a wolf or a hyena. In many cases, they were even higher. They were at the very top of the food chain. For years, this was the killer evidence. It proved the Neanderthal was a super hunter, a specialized meat eater. The case seemed closed. But science never stops, and the next set of clues came from a very strange place: Neanderthal teeth. Specifically, the plaque on their teeth. We all get plaque. If you don't brush it off, it hardens into a substance called calculus or tartar. And it turns out that tartar is an amazing time capsule. It traps tiny little bits of everything that goes into your mouth: food particles, pollen, bacteria, you name it. And under a powerful microscope, scientists can see what a Neanderthal was eating right before they died. What they found in Neanderthal tartar completely changed the picture. They found the expected stuff, like proteins from meat. But they also found things that didn't fit the hypercarnivore story. They found starch granules. Starch comes from plants. They could even identify which plants. They found starch from wild grasses related to modern wheat and barley. They found starch from legumes like peas or beans. They found starch from underground tubers, the prehistoric equivalent of potatoes. And here's the really amazing part: many of these starch granules were cooked. When you cook starch, it gelatinizes, it swells up and changes its structure. Scientists can see this change under a microscope. This was the first direct proof that Neanderthals were not just eating plants, but they were cooking them. They were gathering wild grains, maybe pounding them into a rough flour, and making some kind of gruel or flatbread. They were digging up roots and roasting them over the fire. This is not the behavior of a simple brutish carnivore. This is sophisticated food processing. It shows a deep knowledge of the local environment. They knew which plants were edible, where to find them, and how to make them more digestible by cooking them. The dental plaque revealed even more. At a site in El Sidron, Spain, scientists looked at the tartar of one particular Neanderthal who had a painful dental abscess. His plaque contained no evidence of meat. Instead, it contained chemical traces of plants. Two plants in particular stood out: yarrow and chamomile. Both of these plants have a bitter taste and no real nutritional value. But we know from folk medicine that they have anti-inflammatory and pain-killing properties. This individual was likely sick, and he was eating these specific plants as a form of self-medication. He was using nature as a medicine cabinet. This single piece of evidence gives us an incredible glimpse into the mind of a Neanderthal. They weren't just finding calories, they understood the properties of different plants. And then there's the poop. Yes, archaeologists study fossilized poop. The technical term is coprolite. They are extremely rare, but when you find them, they are a direct snapshot of a meal. At a site in Spain, researchers found coprolites that they could chemically link to Neanderthals. When they analyzed them, they found a mix of substances. A lot of the biomarkers were from meat, as expected. But a significant amount came from plants. The coprolites confirmed the mixed diet that the dental plaque had suggested. The Neanderthals were omnivores, so we have a new picture emerging. The Neanderthal dinner was not just a mammoth steak. It was more like steak and potatoes, but this picture also wasn't the same everywhere. Neanderthals lived across a huge territory for over 200,000 years, from the cold plains of northern Germany to the sunny coasts of the Mediterranean. And just like people today, their diet depended on where they lived. They were adaptable. They ate what was available. In the north, during the height of an ice age, the landscape was a cold, grassy steppe. There weren't many edible plants. The main source of food was on the hoof. So, in places like Germany and Belgium, the evidence points heavily towards a diet of big game. Mammoth and woolly rhino were on the menu. Here, the classic image of the Neanderthal superhunter is probably quite accurate. They needed the massive amounts of fat and protein from these animals to survive the brutal winters. Their lives were organized around the hunt, but if you travel south to the Mediterranean coast, the story changes completely. In caves in Spain and Italy, we find a much wider menu. Yes, they still ate red deer and ibex, but they also ate smaller, faster animals like rabbits. Catching rabbits requires different hunting techniques than taking down a bison. It shows flexibility, and they turn their attention to the sea. At Vanguard Cave in Gibraltar, archaeologists found the remains of over 150 different species of marine life. They were eating mussels, limpets, and other shellfish. They would have collected them from the rocks at low tide. This is a reliable, predictable food source. They also ate seals. We find seal bones with the same cut marks as deer bones. They may have even hunted dolphins that were stranded or close to shore. This is a huge shift. For a long time, it was thought that only modern humans were smart enough to exploit coastal resources. The evidence from Gibraltar proved that Neanderthals were doing it thousands of years earlier. And it wasn't just seafood, they ate birds, especially rock doves, which are a type of pigeon. They also ate pine nuts. We find cracked and even roasted pine cones in their hearths. They were exploiting every part of their environment from the mountaintops to the seashore. This is the diet of a master generalist, not a narrow specialist. In the Middle East, at sites like Shanidar Cave in Iraq and Kabara Cave in Israel, we see a similar pattern of diversity. The dental plaque from Shanidar Neanderthals showed they were eating a wide variety of plants, including wild barley, legumes, and dates. They were cooking these plants. The hearths at Kabara Cave contain the charred remains of plant foods, giving us clear evidence of roasting. So, the Neanderthal dinner plate was diverse and it was local. In the north, it was heavy on meat. In the south, it was a surf and turf menu with a side of vegetables and nuts. This adaptability was one of their greatest strengths. It's what allowed them to survive for so long through dramatic shifts in climate. They were not a one-trick pony. There is one last uncomfortable item on the Neanderthal menu we need to talk about. Sometimes they ate each other. The evidence for cannibalism is undeniable at several sites. In Malagasy, France, and El Cedron, Spain, we find Neanderthal bones mixed in with animal bones. And they are processed in exactly the same way. There are cut marks where the muscles would have been removed. The long bones are smashed open for marrow. The skulls are broken at the base to get to the brain. Whatever the reason, it is clear that on some occasions, a Neanderthal body was treated as a source of food. Why did they do this? We can only guess. It might have been survival cannibalism. In times of extreme starvation, when the herds had moved on and the plants were buried in snow, it might have been a last resort. Or it could have been something more complex. It could have been ritualistic, a way to honor the dead or absorb their strength. Or it could have been an act of violence against a rival group. We will probably never know for sure. But it's a stark reminder that their world was a difficult one, with different rules and different needs. Putting it all together, we can start to imagine a Neanderthals day, a small group, maybe 15 or 20 people, an extended family. Some of the men might head out to hunt armed with their heavy spears, tracking a herd of deer. They are quiet, they know the land, they work as a team. Back at the camp, others are busy. Someone is tending the fire, the heart of their home. A woman might be scraping a hide with a stone tool, preparing it to be made into clothing. Children are playing, but also learning, watching what the adults do. Someone else might be gathering plants they know are edible, digging up roots with a sharpened stick, or collecting mussels from the shore if they live near the coast. If the hunt is successful, the men return. The butchering process is efficient. The best cuts of meat are brought back to the fire. The meat is cooked. The smell of roasting meat and wood smoke fills the air. They share the food. The fire provides warmth, light, and protection from predators. It's a place for social bonding, for sharing stories. Their dinner is not just about fuel. It is the center of their social life. It's about cooperation, sharing, and family. This brings us to a final big question. If Neanderthals were so smart and adaptable, why did they disappear? And did their diet have anything to do with it? For a long time, the leading theory was a dietary one. The story went like, this Neanderthals were big game specialists. When the climate changed and the big herds of mammoth and bison vanished, they couldn't adapt. Their food source disappeared, and so did they. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, on the other hand, had a much broader diet. They were better at catching small game. They were experts at fishing, and they ate a lot more plants. When the big game went away, they just switched to something else. They were more flexible, so they survived. It's a neat and tidy story. The problem is, as we've seen, it's probably not true. The new evidence shows the Neanderthals were flexible. They ate rabbits and birds. They ate shellfish and seals. They gathered and cooked a wide variety of plants. Their diet was much broader than we thought. So the simple idea that they were outcompeted by a more culinarily advanced human doesn't quite hold up anymore. The real answer is likely much more complicated. The arrival of modern humans in Europe probably played a big role. There was now competition for the same resources, and Homo sapiens may have had some subtle advantages. They had projectile weapons like spear throwers and eventually bows, which let them hunt more safely and efficiently from a distance. They may have had larger social networks, allowing groups to help each other out in hard times. Their population numbers seem to have been larger, and there was also climate change. The world Neanderthals had known was becoming more unstable. Perhaps it wasn't one single thing, but a combination of all these pressures. competition with a new, clever human species, a rapidly changing climate, and maybe a bit of bad luck. Their diet wasn't their fatal flaw. In fact, their dietary flexibility is a testament to their resilience. But in the end, it wasn't enough. So, what did Neanderthals eat for dinner? They ate what they needed to survive. In the north, they ate mammoth steak. On the coast, they ate seal, mussels, and roasted pine nuts. In the hills, they ate deer, rabbit, and wild peas. They cooked their food. They knew which plants could heal them. Their menu was a map of their world, a reflection of their intelligence and their deep connection to the land. The old image of the Neanderthal, a dumb brute chewing on raw meat, is dead. It has been replaced by something much more real and much more human. We now see a skilled hunter, a knowledgeable forager, a competent cook. We see a person who could survive in the harshest of environments by being clever and adaptable. When we think about what a Neanderthal ate for dinner, we are not just listing foods. We are telling the story of their ingenuity, their resilience, and their success. They were a successful branch of the human family tree for hundreds of thousands of years. And the evidence of their meals left behind on bones and in the plaque on their teeth is their final lasting testament. It's a story written in the leftovers of dinner,